So this is probably not going to be surprising to most of you who follow these individuals, but there's this new thing going around now that even people who have described themselves as like an old school liberal, like Matt Taibbi has referred to himself, even people who have now identified as an independent, which Tulsi Gabbard has now done. Jimmy Dore has already always referred to himself as a lefty, and so forth. Now, these individuals, along with Glenn Greenwald, are being smeared heavily, and this time it is coming straight from MSNBC. You know, someone actually sat down and decided to write this article. How the populist left has become vulnerable to the populist right. I'm not even making this up. So let's get into it. So you'll see here's the pictures here, Glenn Greenwald, Tulsi Gabbard. There's Matt Taibbi. They mentioned Jimmy Dore later on in the article. This is what you got. You guys got to hear this to believe it. I can't even make this up. Like, some of the stuff is just freaking ridiculous. Okay, let's dive in here. A group of journalists and media personalities who were once at home on the far left has formed a niche but influential political subculture that encourages leftists to abandon leftism for the populist right. Its most recognizable faces are former icons of leftist discourse who have millions of diehard fans. Glenn Greenwald, a co-founder of The Intercept, known as one of the most powerful critics of the war on terror in the Bush era. First of all, let's stop right there with Glenn Greenwald. Let me make this bigger. And I believe I've asked you guys this question before, but we're going to ask this question again. I don't remember Glenn Greenwald ever calling himself a leftist. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I don't remember him saying that. But let's go on. Matt Taibbi, a former Rolling Stone writer who was famous for excruciating defenders of neoliberalism and likening Goldman Sachs to a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity. Matt Taibbi, they referred to him as a former Rolling Stone writer. Matt Taibbi has done more than that. He's written several books. Why would they just... Anyway, let's go on. Tulsi Gabbard, a formerly Democratic House member and 2020 presidential candidate, was aligned with the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. But in recent years, their focus has changed. These commentators have never hesitated to criticize Democrats alongside Republicans, but now they've pivoted to targeting liberals nearly exclusively while forming ties with the authoritarian right. Well, what do we tell you on this show? What do we tell you over at RBN? Why is there more of a focus on the Democratic Party, and maybe more so for them as well? Is because everybody knows what the Republican Party is. The Republican Party doesn't try to pretend to be something that they're not. They don't try to pretend to be grassroots and know that they're not. You know what I mean? The Democratic Party, on the other hand, does try to pretend that there's something that they're not. They pretend like they're actually helping the people when they're not really for helping the people. They pretend like they are the pro-worker party when they are not the pro-worker party. They've sold out the working people. They're strike breakers. They're supporting corporate. They're supporting capital. The Democratic Party, and this comes from Chris Hedges, is the more effective evil, because they make people actually believe that they're actually the ones that's helping the people when they're just as corporate as the Republican Party. That's why there is the focus more so on what the Democratic Party is doing. Let's go on. Anti-lib populism might not necessarily convert leftists into MAGA activists, but it could still do damage by generating cynicism. You see this here? They don't even want you to criticize the Democratic Party. They don't even want you to critique it at all. They want no cynicism. On issues such as free speech, the war in Ukraine, and social inexclusivity, this group's commentary has garnered tremendous attention and plaudits from right-wingers, and some of them have grown fond of using conservative media platforms to spread their message. You see where this is coming from? You see this? By the way, you know who else uses these same talking points? Some of the shows in left independent media. The Majority Reports, the TYTs, they use that same rhetoric that MSNBC is using in this article. In 2022, this trend appeared to reach new heights. Gabbard served as a guest host for Fox News white nationalist in chief Tucker Carlson. Taibbi became right-wing Twitter CEO Elon Musk's go-to stenographer. Let me stop there for just a second. In a most recent interview that I saw with Elon Musk, he said that he's always voted Democrat. So there's that. Why are they coming after Matt Taibbi? Because Matt Taibbi released the Twitter files, and most of the information that has been released from the Twitter files has been about the Democratic Party. That's why people are calling Matt Taibbi right-wing now. So this is someone who's actually a journalist, and they want him to not report certain information. Don't go too hard on the Democratic Party. Where's the stuff about the bad things about the conservatives? Where's that? Matt Taibbi has been on multiple interviews explaining this, that look, this is the information that was found so far. They're still revealing more information. But they don't want Matt Taibbi to be a journalist. You see, this is how journalism has kind of split into this political divide as well. It's like you have these journalists that are just supposed to be known for bashing Republicans, and you have these journalists that are known for bashing the Democratic Party. But how dare you be a part of one of the parties and criticize the party and not do your job as a journalist? Let's go on. For a series of leaks from Twitter's internal documents meant to make Musk's takeover of the social media platform look necessary, Greenwald attended the premiere of a documentary about right-wing disinformation mogul Alex Jones and conducted a shockingly sympathetic interview with him. Again, I never remember Glenn Greenwald saying he was on the left. I never remember him saying that. So there's that. Now, why are you not seeing these people that I just mentioned? Why are you not seeing them on liberal media? Because they're not invited. Glenn Greenwald, they won't bring him back on liberal media. There's reasons for that, especially leaking like the Snowden information. They will not bring him back on liberal media. Jimmy Dore, they're not trying to bring him on liberal media. The only people that's really willing to have these people on, unfortunately, is on the right. But in this article, they're never going to mention that. They're not going to acknowledge it. Let's go on. Collectively, these and other lesser known pundits push a political position that could be called anti-lib populism. Lib as in the pejorative slang term for liberal, in currency among leftists and the right. Like all populisms, it purports to oppose elitism and speak on behalf of the people. But as a practice, it funnels people towards the snake oil populism of the right. Does it? Does it? I haven't been funneled to the right. Do you see how it's just the rhetoric? Anti-lib populism may not necessarily convert leftists into MAGA activists in mass, but it could still do damage by generating cynicism that could divide the left. Problem right here, divide the left. You see, they've been doing this more and more recently. They're referring to liberals and Democrats as the left. That's not left. Liberals are fine with the status quo. Do you see how these things they've co-opted the word progressive. The Democratic Party took that word, co-opted it. Now anybody can be a part of the progressive caucus. Now they're taking the word left and applying it to liberals when they do not mean the same thing. See how easily they're trying to confuse people? They're actually convincing people that Democrats are left. Democrats are not left. Let's go on. That's why the left must be vigilant about its rise. The free speech fallacy, one of the most prominent strategies of anti-lib populists, is casting liberal media as the biggest threat to free speech in America. Taibbi and Greenwald spent a lot of energy warning about cancel culture and opposing deplatforming and speech regulation on internet platforms, okayed by a liberal worldview. Some of it's legitimate. I, too, worry about opaque internet censorship and certain aspects of cancel culture, like self-sabotaging groupthink and targeting people's jobs for misbehavior. Honey, you're writing for MSNBC. You will not be affected. But what's odd about the anti-lib outlook is its singular focus on liberals. No, it's not odd. Because again, liberals pretend that they're for those things and they're not. Then they have this video here. How did Tulsi Gabbard go from self-styled progressive to guest hosting on Fox? Well, Tulsi, I can't really speak in reference a lot to Tulsi, except for these two things. Tulsi Gabbard made it very clear that she left the Democratic Party. She announced that. Tulsi Gabbard also is another one that is not invited on these liberal outlets. Why do you think this is why you see her on Fox News? Now, granted, does that mean she should have a show on Fox News? It's her choice. I don't really give a shit. Like, I don't really care. Oops, I said a bad word again. I'm supposed to get better with that. Anywho, they're not mentioning the fact that a lot of these people are not invited to have shows on liberal media. Is MSNBC inviting Tulsi Gabbard to have her own show on MSNBC? No, they're not. In fact, the moment that Tulsi Gabbard decided to support Bernie Sanders instead of Hillary Clinton, her political career, for the most part, the Democratic Party was already done. Let's be real. Let's go on. The right is at least worrisome on the issue of restricting speech, and in some respects far more. The GOP has become an overt advocate for government censorship on college campuses and in school libraries. When he was president, Trump ramped up legal attacks on the media and harassed journalists. The MAGA right endeavors to dampen the very meaning of free speech by embracing disinformation as a political strategy. Billionaires who are hostile to the left own social media platforms and make decisions about speech based on profit motives. Yet somehow Taibbi has said he finds Republicans irrelevant on the matters of speech and has downplayed Fox's enormous influence on the right. I think what he means by that when he says irrelevant on the matters of speech, because again, going through the Twitter files, who was doing the censoring? Who's the one kicking people off of platforms? Who was the one telling, Twitter executives to remove accounts? That was the Democratic Party. All you got to do, again, go through the Twitter files material. We've reported on this multiple times as they released them. Those were the ones who were doing it. That's why. Now, let's go on. Greenwald focuses the lion's share of his criticism of censorship as a phenomenon tied to Democrats and liberal media. Well, if you are on a platform like YouTube, let's remember who owns YouTube. Miss Susan. And let's remember YouTube donated to Biden's campaign. Or Google. YouTube, Google. Susan is a Democrat. Susan kicking people off this platform. Susan's the one who's removing people's. Susan's the one who made these rules and made all these stipulations. I told you they're stricter on the profanity rule now. That was another guideline they changed. This is Susan's company, boo. She's the one that has all these clauses in. You can't say this too many times. You can't talk about this. If you have this certain guest on, your people's videos being removed, people being censored 24/7. Susan is a liberal, and she's doing that. Let's go on. Taibbi's blinker attitude about speech likely explains why Musk, who has revealed himself to be a QAnon-friendly fan of MAGA politics, appears to have entrusted Taibbi with a cache of Twitter documents to report on Twitter's history of controlling speech on its platform. First of all, it's not just Matt Taibbi who is reporting on the Twitter files. There's also Barry Weiss. There's three others too. Lee Fang. And I think the other one is Schonsberger. There's multiple journalists that are reporting on the Twitter files. But if you notice, they are mainly singling out Matt Taibbi. Keep that in mind, guys. To be clear, the leaks have helped shine a light on some deeply troubling issues, like the FBI's apparent input into Twitter speech regulation. But it's notable that Taibbi has exaggerated and misframed the import of his expose, and that by agreeing to conditions set by Musk regarding his access to the information and where he could publish it, he has tainted his findings with the aura of a comms operation. This is such a fucking mess. Like, it really is. This is just one big smear campaign. Let's get to the anti-war part. The populist right is not anti-war. Another example of how anti-lib populism tries to nudge the left to come to mistaken conclusions about the nature of the right is the war in Ukraine. Here we go. Now, Gabbard and other anti-lib populists have correctly pointed out that the Democratic Party has been overly blasé about nuclear escalation with Russia and has stigmatized even minor dissent over the issue of how the U.S. should approach vital democracy with Moscow. That concern overlaps with the leftist anti-war posture of groups like the Democratic Socialists of America. First of all, DSA has been the weakest on this issue if you want to talk about people on the left. So they don't even know what they're talking about. But the anti-lib populists focus almost all their energy on the Democrats, despite the fact that most Republican lawmakers share the Democrats' position. Because right now, the people in power is the Democratic Party. The people who were pushing the legislation and pushing all that money to Ukraine, for the most part, it came from a Democrat-controlled House. They had the majority. They don't now, but they had the majority all last year. That's where it was coming from. So there were Republicans who voted against some of those bills, but the Democrats all supported it. See, they leave that part out. They leave the part out that the president of the United States is a Democrat. They leave the part out that when it came to funding these wars, for the most part, even Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema went along with that. This is just, I'm going to tell you who wrote this article in a minute. This is a hot mess. Jesus. Let's go on. Gabbard cited Ukraine's policy as the primary reason she left the Democratic Party and slams it as controlled by warmongers. Greenwald trumps MAGA dissent on Ukraine aid as a sign of the GOP's political intellectual health. More worryingly, they implicitly imply the MAGA right is anti-war when it's anything but. Now, I don't agree with that per se. I think there are individuals on the right that claim to be, that say that they are anti-war. Also, I don't remember Matt Taibbi ever saying that the MAGA right is anti-war. So I don't know about that. While it's true that the MAGA wing's increasing hesitation to involve itself in Ukraine has the effect of calling for a less hawkish position than many Democrats, the actual ideology underlying the position isn't fundamentally anti-war. Well, neither is the Democratic Party, though. Do you see that? Let's get to there's the part here. Let me get to the part where they mention Jimmy Dore, this part. There are also other players who aren't as big as Gabbard. Greenwald or Taibbi are also involved in this game of pushing the left to consider right-wing populism across a number of different issues. Here it is. YouTuber Jimmy Dore deemed the self-described leftist lawmakers in the squad frauds for declining to try to block Nancy Pelosi's speakership to force the vote on Medicare for all, a strategic question that split the left at the beginning of the Biden presidency. Regardless of one's position on that issue, I had mixed feelings. It's illuminating to contrast Dore's eagerness to dismiss the squad as sellouts with his charitable attitude to the right. Just a few months later, he conducted a remarkable, credulous interview with the Boogaloo Boy, a member of a violent accelerationist movement with roots in the right-wing anti-government and white nationalism belief. Notice they don't go on to tell you who that member was and what that member actually believed. I, unlike some people, actually watched the interview. They don't tell you that Magnus was pro-LGBTQ, that he was at the Black Lives Matter rally, marching with Black Lives Matter protesters. See how they leave this piece out? They don't tell you that there's different segments of the Boogaloo Boys and that not all of them have the same beliefs. Do you see what I'm saying? This is done on purpose. And so they bring up the fact that Jimmy had called the squad frauds and that this action alone split the left. Nah, what split the left was the squad running through an organization called Justice Democrats, which was advertised as having this hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. And then once those punks got in there, they didn't do shit. That's what split up the left. So you had people who really wanted to push them and get them to do what they were supposed to do, which is outlined through Justice Democrats' policies, what they were supposed to do. And then you had the other segment that said, no, we need to be nice to them. They're still the best that we got. That's what split the left. We would have been better off not having them there. But see how they all gonna blame it is Jimmy Dore's fault because he called them frauds and sellouts. Look around. They have sold out. These strike breakers. Does she put that in the article? No, they don't put that in the article at all. Strike breakers. Sending money for war. NATO squad. Sellout squad. Joe Biden's doing a great job, squad. Not going to challenge or press or push anything, squad. I'm going to lie about getting Democrats concession, squad. They are frauds and they did sell out. Call it what it is. Moving on. And then they go on to talk about the Red Scare. Now, I haven't seen that podcast. So now they're going to go on to say how anti-lib populism inverts left-wing populism. It is not unusual for leftist activists and thinkers to focus a significant amount of energy on criticizing Democrats, since Democrats are theoretically more likely to be receptive to or susceptible to left-wing ideas and are more realistic bargaining partners on a number of policy issues like expanding the welfare state. The welfare state. Meanwhile, the right is often seen as a lost cause, or sometimes the right is seen as indistinguishable from Democrats depending on the issue. But in anti-lib populism, liberal politics is portrayed as irreversibly corrupt, and the populist right is hinted at as an idyllic alternative. This is such a mess. This is such a mess. Well, let me ask a question. Why isn't Breaking Points mentioned in this article when Crystal and Sagar identify as this is a populist? Am I right? Isn't that supposed to be the point of Breaking Points? Is like this populist. Didn't they write that book about populism? Why aren't they mentioned in this article? You can read the rest of that if you want to. That is a long article. It is written by, put that back up on the screen so you can see that part. This article was written by Zishan Alim, MSNBC opinion columnist. And there's a reason why you got that job at MSNBC. Let's be real. There's a reason why he has that job. Again, just someone else who's there to run cover for the Democratic Party. I'm so sick of it, you guys. I'm so sick of it. Oh my God. LB says blame Jimmy Dore, but not the politicians. LOL. Exactly. Exactly. I can't believe someone actually wastes their time to write that shit. Anyway, that is a smear piece. That's what that is. So it's coming from mainstream media. And you know what's funny? If people who may not have been aware of who those people are, well, I think they all know who Tulsi Gabbard is, but people who may not have been aware about like Matt Taibbi or Jimmy Dore or whatever, guess what? They know who they are now. Kitty says to be left, you need to be anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist. Robeson, thank you for the super chat. Sabby, have you listened to Mike Presner's report / expose on Tulsi Gabbard? For those who haven't, I think they really should. I have not, but you're like the second or third person to tell me I need to look at that. So thank you for the reminder. Thank you for the super chat, Eric. Heartbreaking to think what would have happened with President Bernie and VP Tulsi. A reminder that local politics is the most important. There are no saviors. I agree. Betsy says can't split the left when they're not really left to begin with. Thank you.